Death Stranding 2 is a game full of mysteries and questions, all of which, or at least most of which, are answered in roughly the last 4 hours of the game. What I want to do, take a look at the ending, explain some of the plot twists and some of the bigger moments of the game. So we're going to look at this game, roughly the last 4 hours of it, and we'll talk through it. And if we need to explain anything from the past, from earlier on in the game, we will bring that up when it is necessary. So we're going to start in the third and final confrontation with Neil. Again, you do this multiple times throughout the game, but this is easily the most important because after kind of defeating his round one, you see his backstory. So you get to see him as a child in a town that's being attacked by BTs, and he's actually saved by this girl. And then ultimately he ends up leaving the girl supposedly at the time for dead, right? And he clearly is pretty remorseful of that. So that info is transferred to Sam. Then you do round two of the fight, and then you get everything else. So we've been seeing these flashbacks much like we did with Cliff in the first game every time Sam plugs in the BB unit, right? Now we get the whole thing. So we go back to Lucy, right, as a therapist that deals with people that are like Sam, like Neil. In this case, Neil has been going through it because he's been tasked with delivering BBs across the Mexican border, right? And we get a little bit of the background there that, you know, because of the illegal nature of him jumping borders and stuff, the government's doing him a solid, looking past his crimes, and instead, you know, he's kind of one of these ultimate porters. So he tells this stuff to Lucy. We jump ahead, you know, they continue their relationship, and that's really one of the biggest parts. This is really where they start to insert this storyline into what we previously knew in Death Stranding 1. So these two form a relationship. They love each other, but Lucy is pregnant, and we do find out, like, this is during the time she's with Sam. She's married to Sam, and eventually she tells Neil this, that she's with him, she loves him, and she needs to break off this relationship with Neil. So that's it for now. We're going to go back there, but that's as much as Kojima wanted to tell us in the moment. So what that really does, and we jump to Fragile and Sam now, is we're jumping to, okay, time for Sam to fess up, right? Because early in the game, he kind of is in this, like, outgoing denial to everybody else, saying, okay, well, he never liked Lucy. They were never together. That kid wasn't his. And that very much goes directly against what he said and others said in the first game, right? He's just lying. He was hurt. He now knows that she cheated. And they also all know that Lucy was doing that really to protect the baby. Because if Bridges found out that that baby, which ultimately, by the way, they do, is Sam's child, a repatriate, right? That's going to be a big problem. So she wanted to kind of throw them off the track. Again, it doesn't work, but she ultimately says, okay, well, Neil, you have to say you're the dad. I'm going to tell everybody that you're the dad so that people aren't going to look at this child more closely. All right, next up, we have to tie a quick thing in with Higgs. So there was always kind of this question throughout the game of, like, who did the earlier stuff? Who took out Fragile/Lou? And we'll definitely discuss that more in detail in a second. So eventually we get the acknowledgement that it was Higgs. Now remember, Higgs is using all of these ghost mechs as kind of portals for himself. So technically, like, the true Higgs didn't do these things, but technically, I guess, within the game, it was him, right? He's the one who pulled the trigger. And up to this point in the game, he then acknowledges he's the one who took out Lou. And now we jump to where we get a lot of plot exposition all at one time. So Sam goes to the bridge and is met by the president of APAS, and he kind of goes over the master plan. Now, this quickly actually turns into nothing, funny enough, so we'll try to rapid fire this. So basically, this was like a stealth operation for APAS to control humanity. They wanted Sam and Drawbridge to link up Australia, because once you link up Australia, that's the next step to opening these gates, right, that can connect the entire world. So the end goal is basically to enslave humanity, right, and kind of put them in a box, automate everything. They kind of bring that thing back up and just say, okay, well, we are going to basically trap you guys. We don't want you leaving houses. We don't want that connection. We don't want anybody doing anything. We don't want porters. But it is, in a weird way, a way to preserve humanity and make sure that the last extinction doesn't happen. So again, it's a control type method. They want to enslave everybody, make sure that they live by their rules, and also at the same same time making sure the extinction doesn't happen. But what you'd be doing there is simplifying humans so much that most wouldn't make it anyway, which Sam kind of addresses as well. And this does actually connect to Higgs. It was talked about throughout the entire game that Higgs and his ghost mech operation was being funded by something, and this president had suggested a couple times maybe it was Charlie, right? That Charlie could be like the mole in the organization. Technically, it could be anybody, but somebody was promoting Higgs to do all of these things. Also, somebody had to kind of get Higgs out of the beach he was stranded on in the first place. We find out it was him all along. He was funding it and helping Higgs along. Now, we will find out later on in the game, Higgs had his own plan anyway. We'll get to that in a second. And I guess the final twist is that the president is not actually a human being, as we're led to believe. It's just a robot. So again, kind of these robots enslaving human type situation. Now, the big twist after this big twist is actually that Charlie was Hardman the entire time. This is shown to us originally in one of the craziest sequences I think you'll ever see in a game, through one of the greatest, I guess, performances you'll ever see in a game. And then we get the main twist, and Hardman basically tells his entire side of the story that he was always one step ahead. He knew all this stuff was going to happen. And because the idea was when Sam would connect, right, his device that he would use, this is something that the president thought was going to be linking everything with not just each other, but with the beach, right? That was the whole plan. When in reality, Hardman was one step ahead. This was actually the opposite. So Sam, every time he connected things, he was connecting them to each other. So he is doing that goal of connecting the world, but he's not connecting it to the beach. In fact, he's severing those ties. So without us even knowing it throughout the entire game, we're linking humanity and we're actually preventing this enslavement of humanity, whereas the president thought it was the opposite. And that's that. I mean, honestly, that is told over like a 10-minute, maybe 20-minute cutscene. It really boils down to that. Then we get third twist in the last 20 minutes is we get the red samurai that previously, you know, there was questions of, okay, what's going on with this? The first time we see the samurai fighting Higgs, they don't show their identity at all. Then we find out that it's Deadman controlling it. Then we find out that it was Higgs all along. So Higgs is behind the samurai as he was behind the ghost mechs. And then we get this final kind of evil plan that he has. So the goal is ultimately still to cause the last extinction. This is what he wanted in the first game. It's what he wants here. Now, in the first game, he needed to use Amelie and Sam. Those are no longer options anymore, as he tells Sam in this scene. So the next option is to use Tomorrow. And this is where you get just the outright statement that Tomorrow is Sam's child. Now, this is actually something I predicted a couple weeks before the game came out, but this is where you get that full reveal, and he just flat out tells Sam that. So he takes Tomorrow to a beach to trigger the last extinction, and then we get the plan to rescue her. Now, we're going to skip a good half hour of like game time. There's really nothing that happens there except we need a physical item that connects to Sam and Amelie. So we're going to go for the picture that Sam, we've repeatedly seen this picture in Death Stranding 1 and 2. So we're making the trek all the way back to the plate gate, and then we're going all the way back through Mexico to Sam's hideout, and that's pretty much the next part of the game. It is here, though. I mean, we get some nice scenes. It's not anything like groundbreaking to the story, but they're actually kind of depressing and sad that Sam is, you know, reliving Lou as a child and going through just these childlike things. So Sam retrieves the picture, and they're ready to make the jump to the beach. Now, in order to do that, Fragile obviously has the power, but it's weakened, so everybody with Dooms has to kind of put their powers together in order to help her make that final jump. That is a pretty cool scene, and we actually see some characters that are either briefly mentioned or not actually even in the game at all, including Mama and Lakna, which you see them kind of floating around. You see Dollman as a human form, so that's pretty cool as well. Now, it's important to note that when they do make the jump, everybody wakes up except for Fragile. She wakes up with enough time to be able to say, "Get us airborne," and she leaves Sam with a pretty ominous final line of, "Remember, I'll always be with you," before she passes out again. So everybody has their plan. Sam is going to go on foot to confront Higgs and get Tomorrow, while the DHV Magellan is going going to go through the sky and have one of the coolest background fight scenes that we've ever really seen. And now we jump to Higgs's moment here. So we get pretty much his entire backstory, the loneliness that he felt. So he was on the beach for an incredibly long time. Remember, the time on the beach and the time in, say, the human world, they operate differently. You could be trapped on the beach for days, and it could only be a couple minutes in real time, so on and so on. So Higgs was trapped for an enormously long time, really wanted everything to end until he was actually approached by APAS. So as we already learned from the president, but now we get Higgs's side of the story. So they approached him and they wanted to use him, right? That was the president's side, and they were going to arm him and all that stuff. From Higgs's side, he saw it as an opportunity to get out. He saw it as an opportunity to use their resources and what they were able to provide him, and he still was in it to do the last extinction. That was always his overall goal. Yes, to get revenge on Fragile and Sam, but ultimately it was to achieve that bigger plan of his. So we have phase 1 of his fight, guitar against guitar, pretty epic. And then we have phase 2 of his fight, which is a little melee, back and forth, swinging the guitar against each other. And I guess technically even a phase 3, a little bit of a side-scroller action game going on there. Okay, so now we get to probably the most confusing part of the entire game, something that I feel like is up for interpretation, so you guys can take your stab at it in the comments. So the goal is to enter Amelie's beach, right? And that's this like, kind of portal thing opening up here. And he's using Tomorrow to do that, right? You need somebody like Tomorrow in order to do it. So what happens is Tomorrow is sent through this portal. Okay, she makes it through. And then what comes back is a giant baby Lou. Now, the way I kind of perceive it is this is somewhat of a split between her ha and her ka, right? Remember, ha being the body, ka being like body and soul, okay? So I see it as that. I see it as she technically didn't have to come back as Lou. I think that was just for some sort of maybe thematic thing where it's like, well, Higgs is the one that took Lou out. At least, again, we think this in the moment. So maybe this is some sort of theme. It's here that Lou kills Higgs, so gets rid of him. So I can see, like, thematically how this all works. I don't necessarily think, though, that this needs to be Baby Lou. I think this could technically be anyone that Tomorrow kind of chooses to inhabit at that time. So then we see Baby Lou go back through that portal, and it basically transforms. We see that string of light and it becomes Amelie. Then we see Fragile, not in her human form, right? Carrying Lou seemingly as a body, carrying it to Sam. The way I see this in my head is just kind of making everything complete or whole again. So not only, obviously last extinction is over, okay? So like bad guy loses and good guys prevail and like the mass plan is over. Yes, that's one phase of it, but I think a deeper thing is the separation between Lou as a baby and Tomorrow. And then technically, I guess you can go into like the ha and the ka. They've been reunited once again where maybe they were split up. Something along those lines is kind of how I rationalize that in my head. Because we see Fragile give Lou back to Sam, and then we get pushed back into the water, kind of pushed back basically into reality, right, from Amelie. And then we're sent to this, it turns out to be a dream, where Sam is basically reliving the beginning of the game. It's snowing this time around, gives Lou a kiss, and then does the same thing he did in the beginning, right? He walks all the way back to his shelter. This time, though, he walks to the DHV Magellan. Now, the dream kind of ends, and it goes back to Sam once more on the beach. So I think this is kind of completing that Amelie and Fragile scene, and Tomorrow is laying on the beach, and Sam embraces her. So that kind of ends what we just saw. Sam was just dreaming the whole trek across the mountain thing. Okay, now we get the biggest twist, arguably, of the entire game, where we're told that Fragile has died, and not just has she died, but she's been dead this whole time. So again, they're messing with this ha and ka. To put it very shortly, what she ended up doing is saving Lou, and this is how you connect Lou to Tomorrow. So when Higgs came to them in the beginning of the game, Fragile did manage to transport Lou into a different place, right? She took her to a beach, and what ended up happening in that moment, she split her own ha and ka, right? Physical body and soul. So her soul actually ended up dying in that moment, but again, because time is all messed up, her body, or say her physical form, was able to live on to still be with Sam this entire time. So technically, Fragile died at the very beginning of the game. She just kind of kept herself alive enough to kind of mentor and just get Sam through the entire thing. So that's Fragile's story. We're going to finish the Lou story in just a second, but that's where the game leaves it right then and there. Now we're going to jump to Neil, where we get the rest of his story. So the end of him and Lucy is Lucy wanting Neil to take them to Mexico. She wants to escape with the baby. Remember, this is after trying to make everybody believe that the baby is his in the first place. So they devised this plan basically to just escape. It doesn't go so well, and we're led to believe she dies right then and there. This does kind of lead to a plot hole with the first game. First game through the journals, we're led to believe that Lucy takes herself out by doing drugs. And it's a little unconfirmed even in the journal of the first game. Again, here we see it very, very differently. So she dies from the gunshots, and then Neil also dies from the gunshots. We also then find out that Neil is the one that causes the void out. We were kind of led to believe that was Lucy in the first place, back at that medical center. Now it's Neil, and that seemingly is very much confirmed. And we actually see that Sam was able to make it to Lucy before the whole thing blew up. Again, in the first game through the journals, we don't exactly see it that way. It very much sounds like Sam made it back, but never made it to her. Well, turns out he actually gets to pick her up, walk down the hallway, and then the whole thing blows up. And then we get our conclusion with Lou. So in that moment that Fragile jumps them to the beach, again, her soul dies, but then her soul actually is able to transport Lou to basically a safe haven, somewhere that she's obviously not going to die, and she takes her to a land of a dead in a different beach. Now, this is actually Neil, right? This is that connection point. We get to Neil earlier on in the game. The very first time that we fight Neil, we find out that Tomorrow has been living there in that beach, and we rescue her. We bring her back to the human world, let's say. Well, turns out this is how she gets there. Fragile brings her, and she basically is raised and brought up in this land of the dead. Now, it's not a perfect lifestyle, but it does keep her alive. And we see through the visuals that she grows up and she literally becomes Tomorrow. And then we see the ending with Sam and Tomorrow saying, "I'm your Louise," and they embrace each other. Now, technically, there's an end credit scene of the game, and it's actually Tomorrow dressed up in both actually the attire, which I love this, the attire of both Fragile and as Sam. And we see her standing amongst a gate. So this very much to me indicates that if there is a Death Stranding 3, she's going to not only a different part of the world, to connect it, but she's taking up the mantle for Drawbridge, for Sam. She's the new Porter that we would then play as. Oh, and by the way, I found this at the very, very end of the game when I talked to Dollman. I don't know if you can actually find it earlier, but just very, very quickly, his story was simply he was a human. His wife had died. Him and his daughter went to visit his wife, and they were both killed, in that moment. Now, Fragile ends up finding them, and what ends up happening is he pushes his daughter's soul out of the doll, but traps himself. So after they're killed, again, physically, their souls were, kind of lingering. The daughter ended up going inside the doll, but was trapped. So he said, okay, well, if I push you out of the doll, you'll be able to escape and be able to go to where the dead is supposed to go, and I'll be trapped in the doll. So he does that. He's trapped there for a very long time. Eventually, Fragile picks him up. And, his purpose throughout the entire game is to kind of be a therapist of sorts to Sam and work through, because remember, for a good amount of the game, Sam is believing that Lou didn't die and Lou was inside that pod, to which, eventually he realizes that that was not the case. And that's the story. Again, a couple things here and there that I'm not, basically how the last extinction is saved is something that I'm not 100% sure on, but that's the rest of it, largely, like I said, told in the last 4 hours of the game. Let me know what you think. Make sure, as always, you're subscribed to the channel, bell icon turned on, and I hope to see you all on the next one.